everyone, this is Hearthstone Meta Hype. I am eCore100 with my friend Venga Dragon. How's it going, Venga?
It is going very well, and thanks again for chilling out with me tonight, eCore. You are the man. Let's do this, brother. Let's go.
Yes, indeed. Dude, I have a question for you.
What's that?
What are your thoughts on aggro in Hearthstone?
Aggro and Hearthstone. All right. Well, easy. The balance update with Nitro Boost Poison to 2 mana. Nitro Boost is now give a minion +2 attack, corrupt and your weapon. Game over. Episode over. See you next time, guys. Let's go. They solved it. There you go.
No,
That's my
I'm
answer.
talking more in general. Like, obviously, the nerf is nice with the Nitro Boost, but like also just in general. What are your thoughts on aggro?
Yeah, I on a serious note, I do believe it's a serious problem, because it's a serious problem right now in the sense that it's fine to win, right? Like we've talked about this before, like where we said like winning is important and winning is fun, but losing to aggro is not fun. And then sometimes I think like I've stated that with the aggro decks, when you play an aggro deck and you win, it doesn't feel as great as when you win with like a mid-range deck, to me anyway. So I feel like it's just, I know that's kind of weird, but it's like winning is winning, but it's just so bad to lose to, because you're on a clock. They're just way too aggro. It's way too aggro, in my opinion. So,
okay,
makes sense, bro?
Yeah, and I get that. And I had the same thought process for a pretty long time. But as I've played the game more, I've slowly started to realize that aggro really isn't that bad, and it's kind of blown out of proportion. Like, sometimes there will be problems with aggro. Like, sometimes they will print a Nitro Boost where, if used optimally, it is 1 mana for essentially like 8 to 10 damage. And that is ridiculous. There are some objectively overtuned cards, but I feel like overall, aggro is not that problematic. Maybe that's just because I play in Legend, for the most part, or at least Diamond most of the time, so most people know how to deal with aggro. But if you mulligan correctly, tech in some good cards like weapon removals or silences, depending on the meta, aggro is pretty manageable, and a lot of the times can lose to like 1 good board wipe. Like Zulok can lose to like Warrior to 1 good board wipe, or Control Warlock if you get a good Dark Skies, or Aggro Warrior, or not Aggro Warrior, Aggro Stealth Rogue with the Self-Sharpening Sword can sometimes just lose if you play Acidic Swamp Ooze after they like Nitro Boost Deadly Poison. And I know that this video is probably going to be disliked because of the fact that I'm saying aggro isn't a problem, but it really isn't. And I have a couple of other things that I'm going to say, but I just want to hear your thoughts on what I just said.
Let me interject here, because I thought of something right away when you said it. I can agree with what you're saying, and then there's also a point of disagreement as well.
Okay.
I think for the most part, I do agree with you. It's not a problem because it is solvable. Right? It is counterable. You can counter it. The problem with aggro right now is the form that we have is very polarizing, meaning if you counter the aggro, we're not polarizing. It's more like it's just so aggro. It's really very aggro. I mean, the lack of trading, like for example, Zulok, for example, though, is a good idea of like, you kind of know how, you gotta have to know how to play that. You gotta really know what you're doing. Like it's about a good mulligan. It's about being able to drop down the cards in the right way. Time your broomsticks, time getting back your minions in your hand, stuff like that, and essentially managing your board properly. So I think that Zulok is pretty aggressive, but it does take skill to play it, or I think more skill. The problem what I see is that some of these aggro decks that are just like play a card and do 4 damage to both heroes, right? Don't trade, just keep going face, upload a weapon, bang the face, cast a spell that doesn't allow your opponent to trade, with Hunter. I'm talking specifically.
Yeah, I got that. Nobody runs
those.
the 4 damage to each player except Hunter, face Hunter.
Right. Yeah, and you know what I'm saying? So it's like those kind of ones where it's just like you just essentially just lock and load, reload just with the rogue, for example. You reload your cards, you get the card you need because you have a ton of draw, and really all you're doing is just top decking. There's hardly any, like, the rogue class has been pretty interesting. Like I spoke to one of my viewers when I stream on YouTube, and he said, I don't like where the rogue class gone. It's just so aggressive. But the card I'm talking about specifically is when you put down the stealth rogue, you can't deal with that. There's only one way to deal with it, is to be able to have something that could clear that particular stealth card. And you always get it. And even when you kill that one, they automatically get another one. So there's some problematic cards in that type of aggressiveness. But I do agree with you in the sense that you can deal with it like it's one good board wipe, but that requires you to have skill on the other side as well. So that it's kind of good. Like that's a good thing. It's a good interaction there because you can time a board wipe to do it. But that's also, your opponent though needs to play skillfully and avoid that, putting themselves in that position to get there. I think that some of the decks that are very aggressive just keep on just putting up boards that are just really impossible to have that one good instance of where you can take down your opponent.
I mean, other than a couple of things that you're talking about with Hunter, most of the complaints you had were about Rogue specifically. So my question is the problem Rogue, or is the problem aggro, or is it Rogue? Because I think that Rogue has given aggro a really bad name. Because so the reason why aggro I think is kind of balanced is because a lot of the times they'll run out of steam, right? If you're playing against an aggro, even a demon hunter to some extent, kind of because they're not stealth, so you can deal with their minions easier, and hunter because they have no draw, can run out of steam pretty quickly. But the problem to me is specifically Rogue and the amount of draw and resource generation. And the Nitro Boost Poison does help this. But I'm saying that aggro as a whole isn't a problem. Aggro is a very needed archetype in the game. If you don't have aggro, you're going to have like combo decks just absolutely dominate the meta, because aggro is in the meta to beat like slower, mid-rangey / combo focused decks. And if there is not aggro, then those decks will just win all the time because they beat control, and then control's counter to aggro won't matter, because if they gut aggro, it won't happen. And another thing is there's always going to be complaints about the meta. Like, if you've played for a while, if you remember Shutterwalk Shaman, if you remember Hadronox, if you remember mechs like Odd Warrior with Dr. Boom, all of these things were really problematic, and they were control decks. And that didn't make control as a whole a problem and super hated. That was like, just these cards are problematic, but people would say control is problematic. Like, stupid control decks are dumb when they played against Odd Warrior. It wasn't control. Without control, all of the meta, I have a triangle, basically, that it's like rock, paper, scissors, like aggro beats combo beats control, control beats aggro. Without control, one archetype will just win all the time. Like, if you're playing rock, paper, scissors, and you take out rock, why would you ever not choose scissors? Like, you have to have all three of these things, and just because there are a couple of really broken cards in the meta for a certain archetype, like right now Rogue, it's not really that problematic. Also, if you look at some of the best decks in the game right now, you have, at least in top 1000 Legend, it goes Res Priest and Rage Warrior, Stealth Rogue. Stealth Rogue is an aggro deck. Then it goes Broom Paladin, Whirl Kick Rogue, Token Druid, kind of pretty aggro. Then Highlander Priest, Secret Rogue, and then Guardian Druid Spell Damage Mage, which is aggro. Less than half of the decks in top 1000 Legend are aggro when you get to a higher skill level area. And then if you go to just Legend in general, Stealth Rogue and Zulok are at the top, which is partially because Stealth Rogue is a problem, but the Nitro Boost Poison will bring it back. But then it goes Broom Paladin, Whirl Kick, Enrage, then Token, which Token Druid, which is kind of aggressive. Then Secret Mage, which is more mid-range in my opinion. Highlander Mage, Ramp Paladin, Guardian Druid, Highlander Hunter, Secret Rogue. Like, if you go down the list, the only problematic aggro decks are the Rogue, Stealth Rogue, and Zulok. And Zulok I don't think is that problematic because I think it has more skill to it because you have to manage your health, you have to discard certain cards, you have to set up your hand correctly and know when to commit to the board because you don't have direct damage. You do damage to yourself, so you're vulnerable to direct damage yourself sometimes. So I'm okay if Zulok is a powerful aggro deck because it also you can deal with their board because it's not stealth as much. My argument is literally it's just Rogue that is the problem, not aggro. And again, I think that aggro or just deck archetypes as a whole generally get a bad name. Like OTK. OTK decks people were hating on for a little bit, and generally speaking, people don't like that deck because it's not interactive. Although they are the most fun because they're OTKs, they're fun to pull off. But the Turtle Mage, even though the win rate wasn't good, people didn't like that deck very much, and it was nerfed, and it gave the OTK archetype a bad name because people were just like, this is super duper toxic. You don't get to play the game, it's frozen and all that. And I don't know, I just think that it's very easy to mistake one overpowered deck that's kind of overtuned with this entire archetype is stupid and overtuned.
Yeah, well, I wanted to come on and say this 100% agree with you that the idea of aggro decks is not mindless, numbing, like don't know how to play like the deck and you still win. Aggro players, if you're a good aggro player, you're a great player. Like a good aggro player could be like a really great player. And it's so like for example, a good control player doesn't get that same level of amplification of greatness. To be, like, I know that sounds weird, but this is what I'm saying is like, if you know how to play an aggro deck well, you're going to reap the rewards much more than if you know how to play a control deck just well, like fair, right? Like it's like interesting, like it gets amplified. Like, so it's hard to be a really good aggro player because there are so many things of timing and like you mentioned, knowing when to trade, knowing when to commit to the board, knowing when to go face, all those different things. The problem, I think, is you're right. The Rogue does give aggro a bad name, and what you described as far as with Turtle Mage then giving OTKs a bad name, it's the same thing. It's like all of a sudden it's the point of direction, and like you said too. The three must be there. Aggro, mid-range, and control must be in the game. Otherwise, the game would be unbalanced. It's the perfect balance, right? So, but Rogue is designed that there's not enough interaction with it. It's when the problem is that it's hard to interact with your opponent. That's when it really becomes a problem. The thing is like you said, like I like to play recently playing a lot of Warrior, and Hunters can be a super big problem. But then there's all of a sudden that one turn where you just flip it, and they have zero chance of winning. They're just there. It really is zero. Now, how does that feel for them on that side? Think about it, how it feels to them. That must really suck because the game is over. It's over, and all I'm doing is just hitting the hero power. I don't even. You could just sit there. You don't even have to attack when you play big warrior. You just sit there. You drop down a 7/7 on the board, and you just keep hitting that has death rattle returns, right? Something like that, or some big taunt like minions. You just sit there, hit the hero power, and there's nothing they can do. They're just not going to win. So that sucks for them. And what skill is in that for me, right? When I'm doing that, there's not really much on that side. So they could make the argument that as a fan of being a player that likes to play aggro, they could say control decks suck and they're a problem, right? Like you said. So yeah. I think the biggest problem with Rogue is right now is pretty much that card Secret Passage. Remember how broken it used to be? Secret Passage. Cards. You got 5 cards for 1 mana.
Oh, I don't even want to get started on Secret Passage. That card doesn't exist to me. Every time I think about it, I get super tilted. The fact that it's in the game. Let's just move past it. It's a problem. I don't want to talk about this card.
Right. I'll just very quickly though, I will mention one thing. It really increases the chance. It's mathematically probable that they're going to get Eviscerate.
They just get the lethal every time. Okay, sorry.
It's very probable. It's probable that they're going to get lethal. It really is, and it makes it more. The probability goes down lower, and so that kind of like that instance of probability being there is what changes the strength of the deck, obviously. It takes away that the fact that if you make a mistake with an aggro deck, that you don't win. So it gives you more room for error.
That's true.
And that is not part of the skill set of how aggro decks work. You have a very small margin of error. And that's the thing. And with Rogue the way it is, it does give aggro decks a bad name. I'll tell you though, another cards that also I think give it are a little bit problematic, that kind of stink, are the ones that when the Death Rattle do damage to the hero.
Yeah, I don't like those cards that much either. I don't like Leper Gnome or the Cobalt Sand Trooper, I think it's called, the one that does 3.
Yeah.
I don't like them very much. Because it makes you feel bad to kill them, but I don't feel as bad about those as Secret Passage. I'm just going to say one thing. You opened a can of worms with this one for Secret Passage. Secret Passage should not keep corrupt cards. If you corrupt Nitro Boost, it should not stay in your hand. It should go back. And it should not keep cards that you draw while Secret Passaging. Like if you play Swindle, those cards should also go back in your deck. Being able to keep them is just stupid. And it generates way too many resources for 1 mana, to where even if you don't find lethal, you usually draw like an extra 2 to 3 cards, which is still broken. Like it's just a reset, and you'll find the lethal for the next turn. Okay, sorry. Secret Passage actually like upsets me. Every time I see that card, it tilts me. Like more than Priest.
No, I get you, man.
Oh my gosh, I used to hate Priest. This is far worse. And what you're saying with the smaller margin or the margin of error, it makes sense. It's correct. I was going to interject and say this because you're talking about the skill of aggro decks. And I really only have 2 more things I want to say about aggro decks. And one you basically said already with the skill. You have in total less decisions to make. You just do. You have mainly one focus. Occasionally you'll have to trade, like sometimes you'll have to kill, like, let's say Varagoth or Ross, or a card that could be problematic just going down the road, right? Occasionally you'll have to trade, but for the most part, you have a very simple game plan and you need to try to maximize damage. The issue with that is that since you have less total decisions to make, one misplay will affect you more than a misplay with a control deck in a lot of situations. Like if you're only going to make 10 decisions in a game, messing up one of them is you're messing up 10% of all of your decisions. Whereas a control deck, you've got like 30 decisions, and if you mess up 2 of them instead of 1 or 3, or instead of the 1 for aggro, even if you make twice as many mistakes, you're still going to come out ahead for the most part, because you're making a lot of other correct decisions, or there are a lot of other correct options, and it's more flexible. And then the other thing with aggro is just the fact that it's so much cheaper than control. Like, I looked at my control decks because people were like, what is your cheapest control deck? I don't think I have a single good control deck that is less than 10,000 dust. Whereas I can name you like 4 good aggro decks off the dome that are less than like 6,000. Stealth Rogue, Zoolock, Token Druid, and Burn Mage. Boom, just like that, 4 top tier decks that are all like 4,000, 5,000 dust or less. Whereas control is more than double that, which is another issue. And that's probably one reason why aggro's played as much. as it is, and another reason why people dislike aggro in general. And again, that's not aggro's fault. Aggro's good for the health of the meta of the game. The issue is there are just some things, especially right now, also with Demon Hunter being released and being a very aggressive class. So that, Rogue, and the fact that it's the most played thing has made it like the most hated archetype right now. But it in my opinion still just isn't a problem. I mean, it is, but the archetype isn't the problem. There are some problematic aspects within the archetype, like Demon Hunter on release, stealth, and the fact that it's the only cheap deck you can build, really. But that doesn't mean aggro is the problem. And that's basically it overall for me. If you want to have some final thoughts on this, you can. But just in general, I think that aggro can have problematic things, but isn't itself problematic. And the same thing goes for OTK and Control. Like, there have always been complaints about all of these different archetypes at some point. There's also Freeze Mage, and they're like, OTK decks are stupid. I don't think OTK decks are stupid. Freeze Mage was just broken, and Freeze Mage in Wild was like 90% of the meta for a little bit. I remember, I don't know if you watch Jack, he's a Wild player on Twitch. And he was like, this is my match history. It was like 19 Freeze Mages, Quest Mages or whatever, and like 2 other decks in total. It was ridiculous. I don't know. That's just my thought process on all this.
Well, you definitely got it off your chest. So are you done?
Pretty much,
you got it off your chest.
Pretty much, yeah. I just don't like when people bash on aggro decks, and then people in my chat are like, but I play aggro decks. And I'm like, that's totally fine. Aggro's good in the meta, and I just thought that it was time I said my piece on this, because like, yeah,
I am glad to hear it.
Yeah,
and the chat is glad to hear it. Check it out. Look at that. I could hear the cheers right now. Everybody, thumbs up on the video. Look at them. Thumbs up. There it is. They're all subscribing. They're wearing their Ecor hero capes right now. They're like Superman. They're like superheroes. Everybody is on your side. Officially declared today, guys. Ecor does not hate aggro decks. He is a fan of a balanced meta with equal amounts of aggro decks, mid-range decks, and control decks. You heard it here on the Hearthstone Meta Hype, where we do this every week. So don't forget to like and subscribe. And the other thing too is a lot of you guys aren't going over to hear the second segment.
That's true.
And in the second segment, we're going to talk about, has Hearthstone delivered on what we asked for? We'll see you over there.